Hey, good morning, Bama fans. I'm Matt Scalisi, joined by Ben Flanagan, and we're back again with you on a Thursday morning with our Bammers show. We've been doing it for a few weeks now, and this is the show where we let you guys weigh in on some of the sort of contentious debates that Alabama fans have amongst themselves. It's the off season right now. This is the kind of stuff that Bama fans are used to talking about this time of year. And this is the kind of stuff that, honestly, me and Ben would be debating and arguing about, whether we were on video or not. And we just figured, let's just roll cameras and we'll let you guys weigh in too. We leave the comments open and I'm able to pull up your comments. So as we discuss our topic today, which is the top plays in Alabama football history, we want to hear your picks, and we're going to highlight some of the comments that you guys make, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching, and we'll make you guys a part of the debate as well. But Ben, before we get into this, I do want to acknowledge to everybody watching, I know we're having a discussion about Alabama football today, and for once in March, this might actually not be the main topic that Alabama fans are thinking about and talking about right now.
Yeah, well, I want to make this quick, Matt. There are 4 hours of the Snyder Cut Justice League that aren't going to watch themselves. So let's just get through this quickly. But yeah, you're right. We're going to get accused of being fogs, football-only gumps, as some folks refer to parts of the fan base. But yeah, congratulations to the basketball team. It seems wrong that we're talking about football when we're just a couple of days away from Alabama being a 2 seed, hosting a 15 seed. Like, it's just insane to think about that after winning their first SEC tournament in 30 years. Honestly, Matt, like, I wasn't sure I was going to see it again in my lifetime. And I mean, I know that that's probably too strong a statement, but there were some tough years, in the Alabama basketball world, but a lot of fans stuck with the program and enjoyed it, cheered it on. We're great fans through the process, and now they're seeing something really special. So that was really fun to watch. Very happy for those players who have just been amazing all season.
Yeah, and to be clear, we respect the basketball program. We don't have, honestly, maybe one day, Ben, maybe in future installments of this program we'll talk about basketball. But look, you're going to get lots of basketball.
Today.
Not today. You're going to get lots of basketball coverage this week from AL.com, from our beat writers, from Lauren Sisler on SEC Insider that you can see on this channel as well. We're just mixing in a little bit of football. We are coming up on spring practice here. It's a nice time to catch our breath. And like I said, get involved with some of you fans out there. LaShonda Woods, good morning from Selma, Alabama. I hope you guys avoided any of those nasty storms last night that were romping around our state. But let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I'm already seeing a couple of picks here for what I think is going to be a popular choice today, and that would be 2nd and 26. We got it from Alex Mann. We've got it from Barbara. We'll see where that ends up on our list, Ben. But let's start at the bottom of our list at number 5 and go from there. What's your pick for your number 5 top play in Alabama football history?
Man, this was tough. It came down between 2 plays, and I don't want to spoil your list in case the one I leave off is on it. But my number 5 is Adam Griffith's onside kick against Clemson in the 2015 championship game. It was just like such a crucial moment at the most necessary time, a play that you wouldn't have never thought that Nick Saban would call, being, relatively conservative, at least in the perception that we had of him as a football coach in terms of risk-taking, fakes, that kind of a thing. But Alabama needed momentum, and I really don't think anybody, especially Dabo Swinney, if you saw his reaction, saw the onside kick coming. And I don't know how you execute a kick like that to such perfection, especially when the stakes were so high. It's the greatest individual moment for any kicker at Alabama, right? Like, I mean, with all due respect to Van Kiffin, Van Tiffin. I know people will joke that there aren't many great kicker moments at Alabama to choose from, but I mean, come on, Griffith, he's a legend for this, an Alabama legend for this. And Marlon Humphrey obviously did his job by catching it and running it out of bounds. Just the perfect scheme at the perfect time for Alabama. And obviously the Saban smile after it worked has become the stuff of Alabama GIF lore. So it was just a really amazing moment. And obviously Alabama went on to win the national championship after that.
certainly not a ton of individual great moments. There have been some good performances by kickers at Alabama. I would say you go back to that 2011 season. Alabama had some big moments, and honestly, there were games where kicking was their best offense.
Look, I don't feel that way. I just, having lived through the last several years, it just seems like whenever there's a kicking issue for Alabama, everybody on Twitter just piles on to the kicking woes during the Saban era. So they were all Saban's missing is a kicker.
You got to find something. You got to find something to needle Alabama fans about. There's not too much. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you on this one, Ben. I like this pick, and I think it's partly sticks out because it was such an unexpected thing for Saban to do in that moment. I don't know if out of character is quite the right way to put it, but Nick Saban is a guy who does the smart thing most of the time. I mean, he's not a guy who's thought of as this sort of risky riverboat gambler type. And it's usually because he doesn't have to be. He has superior talent to the other team, so he doesn't have to take these wild chances. And I don't think this was necessarily a wild chance, but it's always risky to attempt an onside kick. And it was, look, in retrospect, it was the perfect moment to do it because you've got the momentum in the game. You've sort of recaptured the momentum, and then you've got this opposing offense that's obviously so powerful. They're so tough to stop. You'd like to get your defense a break in that moment, and it became kind of a moment where that was the aggressive move to make, not necessarily a desperation move. It was more kind of the thing to do to step on Clemson and finally put them away in what was a really back and forth game. And it in retrospect, it does fit Saban's personality, but at the time, it felt like such an unexpected thing for him to do.
Yeah, like I said, Dabo Swinney, most unexpected for him, too. I think he's still screaming, "You can't do that! You can't do that!" So he was upset. Okay,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, look, he's gotten a couple in since then. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I love that pick. I think that's a fun one, and my number 5. I do not have that on the list, but I have another play later on the list from that game. So we'll get to that one in a little bit. My number 5 is from 2012, another championship season, and it involves a player that I do think, and we did our top running backs, and this guy wasn't on my list. I think this guy's underrated by Alabama fans. I think he sometimes gets swallowed up in the discussion of great Bama players, but this was a moment that really kind of made him an instant legend at Alabama. And I'm talking about the TJ Yeldon touchdown against LSU in 2012. He was one part of the play. It also obviously involved A.J. McCarron being very quick on his feet and executing a screen pass perfectly at a time when Les Miles and LSU were being very aggressive. They were trying to put away Alabama, who really at that point in the game, it felt like LSU was in control. It felt like they were going to win the game, and Alabama just sort of didn't go away. They kept charging back and drove down the field, and I think they got a little too aggressive at that moment, and Alabama sensed it. And this was a play that Ben, you and I were both in the building for this one, and probably one of the most dramatic moments in the early part of the Saban tenure at Alabama.
You're underrating the play, Matt. Number 5. I can't believe it. I've got this at number 2. This is number 2 for me. And my wife and I were sitting in the LSU student section for this play. And thankfully we saw it right in front of us. I mean, it was on our side of the field, and TJ Yeldon just ran straight in front of us, straight line all the way to the end zone. I mean, it was amazing. Alabama was down 3 points, I think, with like a minute and a half on the clock, 0 timeouts. A.J. McCarron just went full on John Elway during that drive, thanks in large part to Kevin Norwood, too, making some clutch catches. I think on 3 straight first down conversions, marching all the way down to the 28-yard line. And then 2nd and 10, like you mentioned, LSU blitzed on the left side, and McCarron just squirted the ball to TJ Yeldon, and he just made some unbelievable individual plays. And obviously the blocking was great, but he had to elude several defenders after he caught that ball, including juking the safety, I think, out of his shoes for an improbable touchdown. And I mean, that place, that stadium, Tiger Stadium, Death Valley, whatever they call it, that place is as advertised in terms of the noise factor. Like, it was obviously hyped up, and it is hyped up. LSU at night, it's the real deal. That game especially. I mean, whenever LSU made a play, let alone a touchdown, the place went insane. And it was quiet after that moment. I mean, just a hush fell over Tiger Stadium. I couldn't believe it after everything that led up to that moment. But, yeah, it was huge. It preserved Alabama's was that before or after the Texas A&M game? I can't really remember the order of the season, but obviously you lose 2 games, you're out of the mix with the BCS. So that was just a miracle moment that preserved Alabama's national championship season. Unbelievable.
You know, now that you bring it up, I'm not actually sure, because I want to say that Texas A&M game came pretty late in 2012, but I'm pulling it up as we talk right now, Ben. We've probably got people watching who are screaming at us. So Texas A&M was the week after that game.
Yeah.
So I mean, look, it was a big emotional surge, probably led to some extent the letdown the week after that. But it was still a hugely important game. Alabama had to have that to be able to win the national championship. But more importantly,
that's why we lost. That's why.
It was coming off a year where where Alabama and LSU split the series, and it was very uncertain who was going to be in control in the SEC West going forward, who was the dominant program. And, you know, it felt like when LSU went ahead in that game that, hey, they're you know, reclaiming whatever Alabama took from them in the national title game. They're getting revenge. Turns out they wouldn't win again against Alabama until 2019. So it was definitely an important moment, I think, in the series between those two teams. Yeah,
it was crazy. I mean, there's no really, like, I don't really have the words to describe watching that in person. It was just unbelievable.
All right, Ben. So that was your number 2, you said. Let's go to your number 4, and we'll work our way down the list.
Sure. My number 4 is Terrence Cody's field goal block as time expired against Tennessee in 2009. This game sucked, Matt. Like, Alabama was like, it was one of the most stressful games I've ever watched. Alabama was out of gas, especially coming off the last week's game against South Carolina. They were in desperate need of a bye week, and they just had to get past Lane Kiffin, who obviously wanted a signature win that would ruin Alabama's perfect season. And look, the odds of blocking one field goal are obviously not in your favor. So after Cody blocked the first one, like, now what are the odds that Alabama could do it again? And Mark Ingram, who is just this stud running back, was obviously the workhorse. We talked about his effort the previous week against South Carolina, where they just leaned on him to carry Alabama to a win. But and also, I mean, at that point, the guy didn't fumble. He was an amazing protector of possession, right? Like, I'm sure the CBS announcers also made note of this, as Alabama just needed to ice the game with a few runs from the Heisman frontrunner who never fumbled. But sure enough, he coughed it up, gave it to Tennessee. I think Jonathan Crompton was the quarterback. He hit a tight end for a long game that put Tennessee in great field position to line it up, and all they needed was 3 points. I think the final score was 12-10, and everybody just kind of felt it in the pits of their stomachs at that point. Once they completed that and were able to line up the field goal, it was over. Tennessee was going to win. No way Alabama could block another field goal, but thankfully, Terrence Cody's as big as Tin Hor Hall, and he just reached that arm up and saved the season for Alabama. And I love the image of, you see the photo, the freeze frame, where Julio Jones is behind him, and he's about 30 feet up in the air. So everybody thinks, like, oh, Alabama would have blocked it anyway. The kick looked a little wide as soon as the kicker made contact, but nobody wanted to find out. They didn't want to see Julio block it or know, like, would he have blocked it? Would the kick have been wide? It was just an amazing play by Terrence Cody, and the collective sigh of relief in Bryant-Denny Stadium and all of Alabama, it could be heard cross country.
Yeah, definitely the loudest I think I've heard Bryant-Denny, and that's a debate too in and of itself. I think everybody's got a moment that they would say was the loudest they've ever heard it in there. I think that specific moment was the peak of what that crowd could do, in my opinion. And you know, I've been going to games there since before it expanded to what its current size is right now. I'm not sure I've ever heard it louder in there, and I do think that's a big part of it, Ben. I think it was that sense of accepting that the loss is happening. It wasn't so much a comeback win, which sometimes has this build up to it where you start thinking, okay, well, you know, if the team just does these two more things, we can win the game. You can see it coming. That's not really what this is. I think there was a sense of dread almost, and I'm sure there were a lot of fans in there who did think Alabama was going to block it and win, but there was, I think, a lot of collective dread in the building at the moment.
It was over.
Yeah, and I mean, look, understandably too, because this was 2009. Alabama fans hadn't seen their team, you know, go through an entire season undefeated since 1992. So it was tough to fully buy in. But that moment of relief when the block happens, I think, is where that release came from the crowd. And you know, it was a big moment for the season, I think. But it was also, I think, a big moment for the fan base to realize there's so many ways that our team can pull out a win, even if it's not going well, even if we have a terrible game. We you know, there's reason to believe that they can pull it out.
Yeah, and I think too, the other factor that everybody was dreading, like despite what he gave to the program many years later, I think people were dreading losing to Lane Kiffin. Like I think that would have hurt people and gotten. I think it would have gotten
that
under
part of it too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, for sure, but I think that would have gotten under people's skin specifically because it was Lane Kiffin, who is obviously this character in the college football world, obviously a very talented coach, and seemingly on the rise as a head coach at Tennessee. Obviously, wouldn't last very long there, but yeah, I think if Kiffin had beaten Alabama, it would have gone down a little differently.
For sure. Want to give a shout out to our fans real quick who are dropping in some old school plays. As you know, Ben and I are what we are. We're millennials, so we've got the memories that we've got. But Ronald Wilson wants to drop in one from Penn State versus Alabama, the goal line stand by Barry Krause. So big one there that we've certainly grown up hearing about. If you lived in the state of Alabama, I mean, we
be respectful, Matt.
Listen, the you know, basically anybody who went to school in the 90s beyond, your memory of those 70s championships is you saw it on the Jumbotron video that they would play before games, the tradition video. But that one was always a big part of it. And
well, look, I was told this was Saban era, so I stuck with the Saban era.
No, I think that's good. But look, we gotta give some props to the older plays, and I want to give another one that's been mentioned several times that's pre-Saban as well, and Don Mills brings it up here. The catch, as it's known, from Tyrone Prothro in 2005, I believe it was, against Southern Miss. And yes, for a while before Saban got there, I mean, that was a big deal. Alabama fans were looking for something to hang their hat on and something to be proud of, and that play, you know, in some ways became kind of a symbol of that 2005 team that ended up doing so much better than any other team had done in the Shula era, and gave fans, I think, a lot of hope for what Alabama could become if all the pieces fell in place at the right moment.
Yeah, that Alabama was not winning ESPYs at that time, you know, so that was a big deal when it happened. I mean, Alabama was at a point program-wise where they needed all they could get, and that play was just so spectacular. And then it went on to win an ESPY and became one of the all-time great college football plays that you would see in highlight reels all the time. So, yeah, huge deal.
Another one here from Chris Anderson before we get back to our list, Ben, the 94 Bama comeback win over Georgia. I actually was at this one. I was a kid, but I was present for this game, and definitely a thriller. So that's a fun one to pull back out from the early mid 90s. So yeah, keep them coming in the comments. You guys are offering some great stuff up there today. Also seen several of George Teague, the strip from the 92 national championship game against Miami.
Yeah,
Right.
I think I was seeing The Lion King in theaters that day when the Georgia came out. I think my parents had taken me to see that. So
It was a good year
yeah,
for movies for sure.
I remember that day for sure.
94. All right, so Ben, I also had the Cody block on my list. It was number 3 on my list, but I'm going to do my number 4 is a little bit of a weird one, and I'm gonna have to get people to go with me here. It's on my list not because it's a highlight that will blow people away, but because I think of the significance of the moment and what it meant when it happened. So I'm going with the moment in the SEC championship game in 2009 when Javier Arenas picked off Tim Tebow in the end zone. And it's again, on film, it's a pretty good interception. I mean, Arenas was a little guy. He was able to kind of camouflage himself in coverage and makes the pick. And essentially, it's a game winner. I mean, it ended the game against Florida. Alabama was already ahead. It wasn't a come from behind play to win the game, but that moment I think was so significant because to a lot of people, Florida was the big hump that year. That was the obstacle that Alabama couldn't get past, and you really felt like if Alabama beat Florida for that SEC championship game, there was nothing that was going to stop them from winning a national title. And I think more than anything else in 2009, for me, that's the play that meant Alabama had arrived, that they were on top at that moment. So for me, that's why the play makes my list.
Interesting. Yeah, that very symbolic. I always loved just watching Javier Arenas. I always loved, seeing good things happen to him, but he was the one making them happen. I mean, he was just a playmaker, whether he was returning kicks or he was intercepting passes and sacking quarterbacks. I mean, this guy did everything on the field that you needed him to do, and just a really special player, one of the all-timers in the Saban era. I'd love to talk more about him as we continue with the series, but yeah, it's a great play.
Yeah, Arenas is a super underrated guy and one of the most fun players from the last 20 years at Alabama, in my opinion. I would say, look, maybe one day we'll talk best kick returners, punt returners in Alabama history. Arenas might still be on top of that list for me, but there have been some good ones that have come along since then. But he was such a threat every time he touched the ball. But Ben, you've got one as I'm going down our lists here. I think the next one on your list is also from 2009. You went a different way with it than I did.
Yeah, the guy who should have been Alabama's punt returner all along, Marcel Darius's pick six against Texas in Saban's first championship win, obviously. Another defensive lineman doing things that you're not exactly supposed to do. He had already knocked Colt McCoy out of the game, changed the dynamic of the whole championship, and Alabama appeared to be in control of it. But it was still a relatively close game, even with Garrett Gilbert in there. But once they tried this bizarre shovel pass that Darius just swallowed whole, I think it became clear that Alabama was about to win their first national championship in 17 years. And Darius was a top 3 NFL draft pick, so it was never a surprise when he did something special like that. But I think it was this play alone that shot his draft stock through the stratosphere. I mean, to get pressure and then to have the wherewithal to see the ball, scoop it up, stiff arm Gilbert like embarrassingly, then pull this spin move and score a touchdown. And he got a penalty on the play, which fired Saban up right afterwards. But I mean, it was just such again, kind of a symbolic moment, right, for that game where it just seemed like, okay, if this is happening, it's Alabama's night tonight. So like nobody saw that coming. And yeah, just kind of reflected Alabama's dominance, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And Darius was just this monstrous, amazingly athletic player for his size, and just a really fun player to watch. And that moment was just crucial and a lot of fun.
It definitely capped off what felt like a dominant first half. And I mean, Texas fought back in that second half, but they had to fight back, and they had a big hole to dig their way out of because that first half was so one-sided in Alabama's favor. And I really do think it was kind of one of those demoralizing plays. It was probably tough for Texas to come back from. It's not just the score on the scoreboard. It's when you, like you said, I mean, you see a defensive lineman spin moving on your offensive players. It's hard to come back from that emotionally.
Yeah, there are a few plays you could have picked from that game too, like not just this one.
The Eric Anders sack was a big one too.
Yeah, I mean, Trent Richardson up the middle for 50 yards or whatever it was, but yeah, the Eric Anders sack. Just in Javier Arenas had another. He snatched from Garrett Gilbert late in the game, a pick that helped seal up the win. So a lot of great plays in that game for Alabama.
All right, we're getting closer to the top of the list now for us, and a couple of folks have already mentioned my next play on my list, which is my number 2. Todd Rutledge just mentioned it in the comments just a minute ago, and I was going to pull it up, but I didn't want to spoil the moment. My number 2 is Kenyon Drake's kick return in the 2015 national championship game. And again, I think the story around it is a big part of why it made it so high on the list for me. It is a great individual play. And we actually had a video from one of our colleagues here at AL.com, Laura Goldman, where she got the data from the little GPS thing that the players have embedded in their uniforms, and they track Kenyon Drake's speed on that kick return, which was, I mean, basically he could have been ticketed in a residential area for the speed he was going on that play. But it was a big moment, I think, for all the reasons that it mattered in that game. It really felt like the moment that Alabama kind of put Clemson away finally, and you have that realization after the play's over that Alabama's going to win a national championship. But I think on top of all of that, you go back and think about Kenyon Drake and what he'd been through that season. And he'd suffered some catastrophic injuries that I think a lot of folks, when they saw him go down on the field, which I believe was against Ole Miss, it felt like not only was this guy's season over, but his career might be over. He might not play football again. And thanks in part to, some really breakthrough medical procedures from the surgeons that worked on him. And also, some good luck with the injury and rehabbing. Kenyon Drake ends up getting back into the mix. And, we end up, I believe they actually had him on the field in the SEC championship game in 2015, which a lot of people didn't think he would be able to play in. And then he comes back out there and does what he does in that national title game. And it just felt like not only as a cap to that season and that game, but to Kenyon Drake's career, where there had been so much promise and then fear that he may never get to play again, to that moment where he's playing at his absolute peak. He's doing incredible things that very few people can do on a football field. And obviously it's led to a pretty good career with him after Alabama as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking of 2 Kenyon Drake injuries. I know he had the dislocated, broken ankle, and then he also broke his arm.
That's right. Yeah. The arm was 2015, but the 2014 injury was the one where he went down on the field, and you have that terrible moment where he's pointing at his leg, and a lot of people were worried we would never see him on the field.
Oh, his foot, I think, was backwards. Like it was not good. But yeah, 2015, I think it was at Mississippi State, maybe, where he broke his arm, and you thought, what luck this guy has. Like, this is just awful. And like he was such a talented guy and seemingly a really beloved figure in Alabama's program, and a great teammate. And so you just wanted great things for him. And then finally, he was able to get healthy and just have this cathartic moment returning the kick, in the image that you shared earlier. That's like one of those, I think, where we knew instantaneously, like, that's the Daniel Moore shot, right? Like and it has turned out to be an amazing painting by Daniel Moore, who obviously preserves these incredible moments in Alabama history. So I'm with you, man. It was huge. And, I mentioned the Adam Griffith kick earlier. Alabama won that game on special teams, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Derrick Henry was great. O.J. Howard was obviously wide open a couple of times for some big moments. But without those special teams plays, I don't know if Alabama wins those games. And they were just thrilling.
All right. Before we go to our next one, Andy Roper and Dwayne Naylor, among other people in the comments, mentioning the Julio catch and run in the 2009 LSU game, which is a big play, and it was a, I think probably one of those plays that I think was in addition to it was a big deal for Alabama to beat LSU in 2009. It also was one of the rare moments where I think Julio Jones was just kind of at his peak in terms of dominating the other team in college. I mean, he did a lot of great things, but Julio struggled with injuries and he certainly was never gifted with an offense like the guys are playing in today. So he had to make the most of his chances, and that play in the 2009 game was certainly a huge deal.
Yeah, huge. The place went absolutely bananas after that happened. And you're right. I mean, Julio didn't have the same offense as these guys have had the past few years, but I mean, it's like you give him a crease and you give him an opportunity, and he had these flourishes where it was like, oh, this is what he's capable of, right? Like in the right moment on the right play. I mean, the guy he could do everything. And so, yeah, that was no shock. It was like, we're just kind of waiting for that Julio Jones moment. And there it was.
All right, Ben, do we have another one before we get to our mutual number one?
I'm at number one.
All right, I think we're both there. It's been mentioned in the comments quite a few times. This was probably pretty inevitable, but let's talk about it anyway. Let's talk about 2nd and 26. This is a play that I think is going to have it has staying power in this spot. I know that we keep every year we do things like this, Ben. We've been doing podcasts and videos for years where we talk about greatest of all time, this and that. And then, you have something like the 2020 season where new records are broken and things are surpassed and the rankings are rewritten. It's going to be tough to top 2nd and 26, no matter how good a season anybody ever has at Alabama.
Yeah, I feel like Georgia fans probably think of this the way Alabama fans, whenever they hear the kick six, like whenever they hear 2nd and 26,
good comparison.
It's just like scratching a chalkboard. But look, I mean, it's one of the greatest plays in college football. I mean, it's definitely the greatest play in Alabama football history, not just the Saban era, all of Alabama football history. Like, how do you top a walk-off national championship winning play? I mean, especially when it's like a deep bomb pass like that from one true freshman to another. So nothing else really comes close, Matt, and we can contextualize the game if we need to. I think everybody obviously knows it's very fresh in our memories, but kind of like that Tennessee game we talked about earlier in 2009, this was not a fun game until the fourth quarter. Like, it looked really bleak for Alabama. I think most fans thought it was over at halftime, and Alabama just didn't have what it needed to match Georgia on offense. And yeah, if you were in the building, you probably thought Georgia was going to win the game. Their fans could obviously taste it, thought it was a done deal, but Tua and the rest of the offense just absolutely lit the place up in the second half. That core of receivers was just spectacular. It's just amazing to think that there were like 19 NFL receivers on the roster at that point. It was a coming out party for a lot of people, including Tua and Devontae Smith. Obviously, Najee Harris as a true freshman, Alex Leatherwood as a true freshman, filling in for Jonah Williams. Just a lot went into that performance team-wide, but this one play was just a master stroke by Brian Dable as offensive coordinator. And just, I don't think people in the moment, certainly, but I think for a lot of people, they still can't believe what they saw.
It was very stunning in how fast it happened. I think the consequences of it are what put it number one, on top of it just being a great play. But, when you go back and look at our list, Ben, every play the two of us picked here came in a season where Alabama won a national championship. And I think that's probably always going to weigh heavily when you talk about greatest plays in the history of Alabama football. It has to have consequences. It's the significance of the play beyond just the play itself and how impressive it is. And, I think you can't have greater stakes. You can't have higher consequences than this play that we're talking about, because it literally is a walk-off game winner in a national championship game. So that's, to me, this is the play that's going to make the conversation for number one play in college football history, period, not just Alabama.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we've seen too many other plays. I mean, it's going to be up there with things like, Vince Young's scramble touchdown.
It's better than that.
In the 2005 title game. But yeah, I mean, it was, I think it's a more impressive play to watch than that because of the players involved and the accuracy of it. I mean, Vince Young was a great athlete, but you mentioned the kick six, Ben. It gets brought up a lot, and Alabama fans hate to hear about it, and college football announcers love to talk about it because it was so memorable and it felt really high stakes. But the truth is, this play that we're talking about here, the stakes were higher. The consequences were greater. Was it as unexpected? No. But it still was pretty unexpected. I mean, it still was shocking the moment it happened. I mean, people were stunned for several seconds. I mean, and it kind of did. What's up, Margot? We have a young Bama fan in the house joining us.
She is.
But right. but like, I think it's the combination of all of those things. But to me, the thing that puts it number one and will be tough to ever top is just how significant it was. I mean, you can't get more significant than winning a national championship on a single play.
Yeah, no, and again, excuse Margo
it's all
here.
Good.
She's joining us unexpectedly.
She knows that we're running over our time.
Yeah, she knows. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, no disrespect to Vince Young and all these other plays out there, but look, I mean, it was a walk-off touchdown to win the national championship game, right? Like, the stakes don't get any higher than that. The moment doesn't get any bigger than that. So to top this in the future at Alabama, something insane is going to happen, right? Like, it's hard to think that anything could top this. That's like how big it was. So you're absolutely right. And for me, we don't have the censors are going to be all over us for that one. But no, I mean, look, this negated the kick six, I think, for a lot of fans too. Like, the hurt of that game, again, this huge walk-off moment that was burned its way into the brains of Alabama fans. Alabama instantaneously had their walk-off moment. And again, it was for a national championship. And so I think that helped heal those wounds finally for a lot of fans. But I want to talk about a couple of quick honorable mentions, Matt, before we go. So we mentioned how, like, all of these plays were in national championship seasons or national championship games. I've got two that really stick out for me personally that were not national championship seasons or games. One was the Najee hurdle against South Carolina, I believe in 2019, wasn't it? Was on the road against South Carolina.
It was 2019,
Yeah, I think it was 4th and 2. Tua hits him on a crossing route, and he sheds a couple of tackles, hurdles a human being, and then just scampers for like 40-something yards for a touchdown, pulls the Megan Rapinoe touchdown celebration. Just an amazing moment, and just cemented his legacy. He'd obviously hurdle like another 10 people or whatever, but just probably his best individual play overall. My second one from 2013, the rematch against Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M, just an absolutely insane back and forth game. Like, I mean, gave me a lot of stress. My blood pressure went up for sure so many times, like I'm sure Saban's did against Johnny Manziel, but he threw a pick caught by Vinny Sunseri way down the field. I think it was off of a tip, and Sunseri just grabbed it out of the air and, I mean, improbably scurried his way, juking Johnny Manziel in the process to just one of the most amazing pick sixes you'll ever see. Really entertaining.
I would say one of the funniest plays in Alabama football history, actually. I don't know why it's so funny to me, but if you go back and watch that play, there's so many moments where he should have been tackled.
Yes.
And he gets to the goal line, and there's like 2 or 3 guys on him. He shouldn't have gotten into the end zone, and he sort of flops his whole body across the goal line. It's very funny, and you can tell the team's having a good time in that one.
Yeah, Sunseri, another underrated Alabama player. It was unfortunate the way his career ended with that injury. I can't remember, like against Arkansas or somebody, but he was a fantastic safety at Alabama with a lot of memorable plays. But that one, I'll never forget that one. Another one I saw in person in a game that just went back and forth.
I'll throw one more out there before we wrap up, and we've had some great contributions as always from our commenters today. I want to throw out one of Trent Richardson from the game against Ole Miss, which I believe was in 2010. Might have been 2011, but don't criticize me too harshly. That was pretty long ago at this point. But the play where he juked the same Ole Miss player twice on the same play is a fun highlight that I have rewatched a couple of times, just to track the guy, track the defender who almost gets him at the line of scrimmage. Richardson goes all the way down the field. The guy somehow caught up to him and got in front of him again and gets juked out of his shoes again.
Yeah, it's one of the most disrespectful plays I've ever seen in my life.
All right. Well, guys, thanks to everybody for contributing to our discussion today. A fun week ahead, or weekend ahead for Alabama fans to get to watch. Look, hopefully for you guys, you get to watch multiple games of this Alabama basketball team starting on Saturday at 3 p.m. against Iona. We will have pregame show here on this channel, wherever you're watching it right now, on Saturday morning, and we'll have postgame coverage as well. And meanwhile, once again, thanks to Ben Flanagan for everything he's been doing this week, covering the storm fallout from yesterday. And we hope all of you out there in the audience are safe and warm and dry somewhere at this point. It seems like the bad stuff is past us at this point.
Yeah, shout out to Moundville and Billingsley, the people who went through something really scary yesterday in other parts of the state. It was not a fun day for most of the state, and some people suffered real serious damage. So our thoughts are with those folks as they begin to recover. Yep.
And definitely, once again, we're appreciative of all you guys who join us on Bammers here every week. We'll be back again next week to do it again. And thank you, Ben, for joining me as well.
Thanks, Matt. And Margaret will have her top 5 ready for next week too. So thanks.